3. Travel and things in association with sun destinations, iconic destinations with amazing experiences, present in conversation with. I am your host, David Batsoffen, and I am really pleased to be joined today by the author of this brand new book, published by Jonathan Ball. The book is called The Buck That Buries Its Poo. The author is Quinton Coetzee, and I thought I had to start with this because bats need all the help they could get. And as a Batsoffen, no, Quinton, I do not hang upside down when I poo. How are you, my friend?
Very, very well. And all the better for hearing your dulcet tones.
And if people are looking at you and going, we know that face, of course you do. Quinton was one of the presenters on 50-50 together with James Steyn in the early days. And he was one of those fellows that said, as jy my 'n kiekie stuur van 'n dangbeetle wat naai, stuur ek vir jou 'n brand new Land Rover Discovery ter waarde van miljard rand. But it always had to be insects doing stuff to one another. What was it with 50-50? Quinton, we're not here to talk about 50-50. We're here to talk about the buck that poos. And as I said to you just before we came to air, it took me a while to realize that that little silhouette there is actually poo.
It's not buck poo now that you pointed out, but it is. It would represent that. You're 100% right.
All right. So why the book? Let's start with that.
Well, initially, the task was to write a book about South African wildlife, something that people could pick up and understand, and maybe a sort of a reference work. Mm. And it occurred to me that, David, this has been done over and over and over again. It's nothing that you can't reference anywhere. There's a number of books, and to find stuff that you want to look for and that's been written down and that you're searching. I thought, what about writing something that many people don't know, that's not that accessible, that it's stuff we know about, it's creatures that we're familiar with, but we didn't know that. Well, this was the thing I didn't know. And I think that with this big movement towards the bush and many people loving the bush nowadays and sitting on game drive vehicles or doing bird watching, they love to enthrall one another with something that the group might not have known, which number one makes them very smarty pants and clever. And number two, everybody then oohs and ahs about. So that was really why the book was written. So it's little things, the tough notes of the buck that buries its poo. Very few people know that a Steenbok actually digs a little hole and then will urinate and poo in the hole and then cover it up with the hooves, just like a cat does. And it's the only bovid that does this. No other buck does. So it's a little add-on to the Steenbok, which you might not have known, apart from the fact that Steenbok can live completely independently of water. They don't need to drink at all. But that's what this is about. It's not about necessarily where you find them and how big they get and what the gestation period is and how long the lamb will suckle. That's not what the book's about. We've taken it to another level where we're talking about stuff you didn't know.
You have indeed, because you caught me out. Now you mentioned lamb, and I want to piggyback on that, because I didn't know until I read your book that the Inyala was the tipping point for bulls and cows and lambs and calves.
That's the watershed.
I mean, if I take nothing else away from this book, I will now know that the Inyala is the watershed for what side of the fence the antelope fall on.
Exactly. So anything smaller is a ewe. Anything the same size as the bull and larger is a bull. So you have a Inyala bull and not a Inyala cow and a Inyala ewe. And so that is that, as you say, is the watershed.
But
now, the interesting thing about that's a case in point. Will this bull and a ewe produce a lamb or a calf.
Ah.
And because nobody's really thought about this, it's an absolute fact. It's not, by the way, this book is based on science. I've put my own opinions in there, and sometimes what I think should happen. But it's a fact that we get a Nyala bull and a ewe. Nobody seems to have given any attention to the fact that they produce a cow or a lamb. So maybe because the female produces it and she's a ewe, she produces a lamb. But
yeah, does it really matter? You know, Quinton, I always say when field guides point out animals and they go, it's this gestation and that gestation, and how do you tell an elephant female from an elephant bull without looking at the genitalia? My initial question is, does it really matter to us as humans? As long as the species we're looking at can differentiate the sexes amongst themselves, that's all we need to know. You know, does it really bother us? No.
Well, as you say, in some cases it's not important. But the other thing is, it's also pointless arguing about these things. It opens up another conversation. Yeah. And we can have a lovely, just as we're discussing, would it be a lamb or a cow or a calf? It's lovely to be able to discuss these things based on the principles that we know.
Now, the other thing, and I mentioned this to you when we chatted yesterday before doing this in conversation with, that I like the way you structured your book, because most stuff nowadays is written, if you look at a news channel, for instance, it's written with a clickbait headline, and then you have to scroll through pages of copy before you get to the answer that was in the headline. With you have stated a fact, and I'll just open a page. How do I'm opening on bats. How do bats mate? I'm not going to tell you. Carefully. Mating takes place while hanging upside down. You've answered the question immediately. And then you go on to explain it a little further. So people, let's say they're sitting in the back of a game drive vehicle or sitting around a campfire, they can get that answer very quickly and then go, okay, let's chat about this. I think it opens, not only is it a great opening sentence, but it's a great opening line to what could be a series of great conversations around a campfire.
You brought that point up. There's a question, and I've based them on questions, and then I try and give the answer right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Unlike when you're looking up a recipe, a simple recipe like pannekoek, and you've got to read through an entire missive, an epistle about how you travel to the farm and granny and the house, and eventually, after countless ads, you find some simple recipe. That's out. Yeah. Here we've got the answer. You can take it further, and then I try and explain, obviously, why I've asked that question in the first place. And that's an important point. A lot of these things are not questions that I asked. Mm-hmm. In all my years in the bush and with people and on veldfocus and so on, I've been the brunt of many questions, with many theories, many of which I've heard over and over and over again. And those sorts of things deserve an explanation.
Yeah.
And it's never really been written down. You know, a lot of these things haven't been answered properly. People don't, I say, why do bats hang upside down? Mm-hmm. We know why they hang upside down, but many people haven't realized that, or they didn't go and look for that answer. And even when you're looking at a whole book on bats, it doesn't tell you that why.
You see, because people assume that everybody knows. You know, this is the same. And the other one that you touch on very briefly in your book is mongoose. So what is but you haven't explained what the plural of mongoose actually is.
I think I said there specifically mongooses, not mongoose.
People, he is very firm about that, because this is one of those instances where you can use the singular as plural.
Well, now you see, in a case like this, I've nailed my colors to the mast because, by the way, geese is not incorrect. It is an alternative plural. But these plurals and a lot of the nomenclature that we use, and I discuss quite a lot of it in the book. And in fact, that's why I might say not geese. I try and get certain terminology. It's not incorrect.
Yeah.
But the plural comes, it depends on what time in the English language, the period, and from which language a word was used. Like moose, for example. Moose came much later on, and it's derived from the American. So you don't get meese.
I was about to say the plural of moose is not meese or mices.
No, it's not. It's
or
not
mice. Now, for people who are wondering, does this book only cover mammals? The answer to that is no. You cover mammals, birds, reptiles and amphibians, fish, arthropods, plants. You do collective nouns, South Africa's protected areas, and one of my favorites, what is the difference between? The first 4, 5, 6 chapters are easy to understand. But what is the difference between? What brought that about?
Well, sometimes we speak about a duck or a goose.
Yeah.
And a mouse or a rat. And so what's the difference between the subtle differences between these things? An adder and a viper, maybe. You know,
an antelope or a gazelle, for instance.
An antelope and a gazelle, and that's actually answered in the book as well. What is the difference? That's a very good example. So, and often they're used interchangeably. I remember when I was working at the zoo many years ago, a woman asked me if we've got any of those big monkeys. And I said, you mean the baboons? She said, no, from that film, Monkeys in the Rain. Which is, of course,
Gorillas in the Mist, Monkeys in the Rain. Was that the Boxburg version?
There's a big difference between, and by the way, baboons are monkeys.
Yes.
So it was just a question of getting that terminology and understanding that a little bit better. Terminology is important. Another one, the point that I raised, for example, everyone will talk about lions having retractable claws. But the lion's claws are not retractable. They're always retracted.
Yeah.
That is the standard default state.
Yeah.
Their claws are protractable.
Yeah. Okay. But then, hang on a second. Now I'm going to call you out on that because you're in a game drive vehicle. You come to a pride of lions, and invariably, the field guide will say, look, there is a male lion. But the word lion, by its very nature, is masculine. So it's not a male lion, and it's not a female lion because I somehow can't see a lion in drag. So a female lion is a lioness. But nobody ever uses that. They go, oh, there's a female lion. No, people, get it right. I have argument after argument with field guides about that. I've made myself very unpopular on game drives because of it. I go, get your terminology right. How did you pass your level 2?
Well, maybe that's where our pedantometers start redlining. As I say, it's not always necessary to correct someone, but if you think about those things, you're 100% right. If you think about protractable versus retractable, or lion male versus a lion, it's correct.
Yeah. I know we shouldn't, but sometimes, and I think you and I are similar in that way, or maybe I'm wrong, but sometimes your mouth opens before you've engaged anything, and you can't take the words back. They've already spouted before you can stop yourself.
I'm hoping that I've got better at that, and clearly you haven't yet.
It's a trait that I'm working on. Trust me, Quinton. I don't want to be thrown off a vehicle halfway through a game drive and go, find your own way back through the male and female lines. See if you can. Quinton, the book, as we said, is published by Jonathan Ball. It's just come out in time for Father's Day, in fact. or Mother's Day, because now there's, I mean, we have a brand new Safari Guide of the Year, and first time ever, Kimmy won, and first female guide to ever win Safari Guide of the Year, which is great. So book for men and women. But is there anything that you, in retrospect, may have left out and you sort of go, oh gosh darn, now I'm going to have to do book 2?
No, there's more than enough based on the style and what I'm trying to portray within this book for a second book. The real reasons why geese and ducks will fly in formation, for example.
Oh, talking about that, let me just stop you there for a moment. You've got a picture of a goose flying upside down in what's called a whiffle position. I didn't know that they could do that, but their heads remain vertical, horizontal to the horizon, which means that, strictly speaking, although their bodies are inverted, their heads are the right way up.
Well, it's just the most remarkable thing. In other words, the goose is flying wrong. Here's the head. The whole body flips around completely. Feet in the air, wings upside down. And they do this when they need an extremely, because look, when the bird's in the normal flying position, no air is able to penetrate the wing. That's what provides, amongst other things, provides lift.
Yeah.
When you invert or turn the wings around, air just goes right through it, and the bird drops out of the sky like a flying manhole cover. And they use this when there's a predator, say, coming down, and if they need to do a fast descent onto, they actually flip completely upside down and lose remarkable height. They just drop out of the sky, and at the last minute flip back, rather than doing a big circle in order to down. They just
so you mean that the coron, as a suicide bird, has got something going for it with this falling out of the sky trick of theirs?
Well, that's it. That's exactly. It's a similar sort of thing,
yeah.
Except it's not done as dramatically and at great height like the geese can.
Okay. Now, moving on to fish, for instance, that, I mean, our world is comprised almost predominantly of water, yet fish seem to have, I don't know, been left behind when it comes to research, because there are lots of fish and other sea life that we know very little, if anything, about. So how did you go about choosing your, I want to say, almost characters for that chapter? How did you go about picking specific fish species?
You could write a book in this vein, entirely on fish. Except that most people don't know as much about fish as they would say birds, or our mammals. So what I did is I've taken the stuff that I've chosen as the subjects, the stuff that people are very aware of, or that's the stuff of myths and legend, or that they might be terribly afraid of, sharks. And so specifically looked in this case largely at sharks and all the myths and legends about sharks, about the fact that a drop of water in a swimming pool, they're able to, none of that's actually true. And then if a shark doesn't swim, if it's not moving, it'll die. And things like this, and the myths about the great whites. And so I've looked more at sharks to try and create a better understanding of these very misunderstood creatures, rather than the piscatorial world in general, because that's huge. That's massive.
Now, I alluded to arthropods a little earlier because you have a chapter on those. And for those who don't know what an arthropod is, it's not Arthur that lives in a pod. It's or Arthur who has a podcast. It's a whole different kettle of fish. So explain to the viewers what arthropods are, and again, why you chose those specific ones.
Well, arthropods would involve scorpions, for example, and the fear of them. And why? It's a big thing. Everyone's buying a scorpion torch nowadays.
Yes.
But do they know why it actually glows in the dark, and what's that process? Why does that come about? That's what I cover. because we've got the torch, but now let's understand why we've got the torch. And
I've done some research on that, Quinton, because I have one of those torches. And it seems like none of the scientists actually know why the animal glows, because even, and I think you mentioned it in your book, or some of the research I did, the cave dwelling scorpions that never see the light of day, because there was some debate around whether they're reflecting light at rays that we as humans don't see and can only see under black light. Yet these cave scorpions are glowing like their terrestrial brothers and sisters. And there's no need for them to do that.
Yeah, they call the troglodytes, the troglodytes,
yes.
The caves really. And I do explain why there are theories about why the UV thing happens. But it's probably in residual light at night, just in the night sky, there's minute bits of UV which they can probably detect. And the more UV that they detect, it tells them that the more they are exposed, which they want to be. And so when and that's why when you shine it on the scorpion, it will probably go away. Not necessarily so, which might blast that theory out of the water. But that's probably the reason why they do that. And it's only done with scorpions that are newly have shed after a while, not newly shed. And interestingly, they found that scorpions, I can't remember now, but it's almost fossilized. And scorpions that have been kept in jars for decades will still glow in UV light.
It's, we think we're the top of the food chain as Homo sapiens, but I've got bad news for us as a species. We are way down towards we're below scorpions. We're even below some of the amoebas that are out there that with no brains or more intelligence have more intelligence than a lot of us that are walking on two legs.
Yes, and as you say, when you mentioned yesterday when we chatted very briefly, you spoke about the jackals.
Yes.
Now, that's another thing which we didn't put in the book. You tell us about the jackal.
Well, the jackal, again, I did some research because I'm busy writing a blog article at the moment, which includes jackals. They've been around for 2.5 million years in exactly the same shape and form. Nothing has basically changed, which is amazing. It's like crocodiles. Crocodiles have also been around for millennia, and their basic shape and characteristics have remained exactly the same. I think maybe because if it ain't broke, you don't have to fix it.
You're 100% right. They've been around in that form. In fact, when they're excavating Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthals, Homo Paranthropus boisei, Australopithecus africanus, in those bone sediments are the jackal as they are today. Both
it's truly amazing. Talking about, you've been in this industry for years and years and years. So if you had a superpower, what would you want your superpower to be?
That's an interesting question. I would like to be able, in my superpower, to see right back in time to how many of these species evolved to what they are today.
Okay.
And what ancestral,
yeah. Ancestral is a whole nother book.
That's another book. Yes. What that looked like at that time, to go back, stand on the valleys and the plains and the rivers, and to see what it looked like then. Not in our world, not in this time, not in this era.
Yeah.
And to go back, that's what I would have loved to do.
Okay. Well, maybe one day you will have that superpower.
Would you like to come with me?
I would indeed. Just as a matter of interest, how dedicated a writer were you? Did you set yourself a task every day and go, right, I've got to put together 10,000 words today, or whatever the case might be, or I have to write for 2 hours and then I can get about my day? Or how did you, because this is not a thin book. I mean, this is a proper volume that would sit proudly on any shelf.
It took me a good few, a year to write. It's a year. And I didn't write all the time. I didn't have a daily task, etc. A lot of weekends I spent locked away doing this because I have other jobs as well. So sometimes I found it very difficult. But what I realized about writing a book like this, it takes a huge amount of discipline.
Yeah.
My goodness. And you've just got to sit down and do it. So I did try and set myself targets, which more often than not you don't meet, but then you just hammer it next time. You have all the plans in the world for what you're going to do tomorrow and how you're going to do it. And things go, as my friend says, things go awry. And then having gone awry, you don't get there. But there were times in between when I struggled. You search for innovation and clarity. Kind of know where you're going, and you sit for ages trying to do simple things. But I got through it, and fortunately, we have very clever editors that come in afterwards and then knock out where you weren't thinking very well that day.
I was about to say, people don't realize that when you write a book of whatever ilk it is, be it a novel, be it a book like this one, you have to have quite a thick skin in the beginning, because you write what you think is a seminal chapter or a paragraph that you think is absolutely stunning. You send it over and they come back and it's redlined and their words taken out. And the first one, I'm sure you go, no. You don't understand what I'm trying to say. So keep your red pen to yourself. I wanted to be like that. And then you realize maybe a day or so later, heck no, they're actually right. What I wrote was rubbish. Let me start again.
No, well, as I said, it depends on the mood. It depends on the nuances of the day, on how you actually write a thing. And it might vary from the next one. But this book being scientifically based, it needs to be based on source. And I got nailed. A fantastic lady, Linda Pretorius. She used to insist, and Annie Olivier, they insist on the sources. Where did you see this? How did you come across this? What is the reference for this? I'll give you one interesting example. This book is not just about animals. It's also about, does camouflage clothing really work?
I love that. I love that chapter. I really and truly did.
Or citronella oil, burning it for mosquitoes. But one of the things was Chanel No. 5. Are you there?
Yeah.
Civets, and the civet musket was used in perfumes in Chanel No. 5
Correct.
in the early days. And the CEO of Chanel, he says they used to whip their civets to get the musk out of them and then make the perfume. And I mentioned that he did this in 1968, but then the pressure group stopped this. And then these editors come back and say, where did you get that source? My source says 1969. And then, because it's science, we can't have Chanel coming back and saying, you guys have got this wrong.
Correct.
And then they are the source, I are the source, and then we say, well, let's call it the late 60s.
I was about to say that it's like the word alleged gets you out of a lot of trouble. And just in the 60s. Quinton, we're coming up to the end of our chat. These things go far too quickly. Is the book available, as they used to say, at all good bookstores? Is it available online? How do people get their copy of this?
It's available at all good bookstores. It's available online. It's out. It's ready to be ordered. And I hope I'll be delighted if you got yourself a copy, because I'm convinced that there'll be, as you say, if there's one thing you can take away from it, that you can enthrall your friends with on the next game drive.
The book is The Buck That Buries Its Poo. It's written by Quinton Coetzee. It's published by Jonathan Ball. Well done, JB. A great read and a very, very easy read. I got the book yesterday morning and I sent Quinton a message yesterday evening going, I finished the book, can we do the interview? And here we are. It's that simple to read. It's also, aside from taking it on a game drive, it's what I call great toilet reading. You can put this in a toilet because you can dip in and out of it. You don't have to follow the chapters. You don't have to follow the pages even. You can go in with no knowledge and come out with a whole new plethora of information that you can astound your friends with. Quinton, once again, congratulations on the book. I look forward to part 2 of The Buck That Buries Its Poo. Once again, my guest today on In Conversation With has been Quinton Coetzee. Quinton, thanks so much for joining me.
You, David. Yes, thank you.